What up? It's your boy Robin Black here. We are talking about Max Holloway versus Brian Ortega. Good times. Good times. When's the last time Max Holloway lost? Did he lose since Conor McGregor? I don't think so. I don't think he has. Has he lost a round since Conor McGregor? Tough to remember one. I mean, he has been fucking spectacular. Yeah. Aldo took a round or two in that first fight. Fuck, this guy's good, man. And we're all pretty excited about Brian Ortega, you know? I mean, how can you not be? Dude's really, really big for that weight. He's become more and more athletic. He's really smart. He's hyper-focused. You know, you see him submit people, and even the submissions that he doesn't get on great guys, like the Cub Swanson finish was amazing, but he had another Cub Swanson submission on near the end of round one that was brutal. And he is slick. He gets you into position to force you to have to give up because you're going to go unconscious or something's going to be damaged, and that's the game. It is a game of positionally advancing until you attack. Typically, but he can skip steps. The best guys can skip steps. Also, against Cub, he couldn't get in. And so, quickly, where I was going with this was we get pretty excited about him because of these submissions and then how he took out Frankie. And so, the quick response, the quick comments or ideas or thoughts that people will express because, you know, sometimes you just have to be quick. You don't have a lot of time. You don't do this for a living. People say, oh, you know, Ortega's underrated striking. My opinion, it could be overrated because of that moment. And that's not using it in a derogatory term. That is using it in just its meaning. And the only reason I say that is a phenomenal minute versus Frankie Edgar doesn't mean every minute is that. It also, and many of his other fights, he looked a little bit stiff. He looked a lot less comfortable. There's no reason to believe that is every minute. You know what I mean? We have many biases by nature, and that's human. We see often people say, "Oh, you know, I really like whoever. I really like Rashad Evans when he talks about." Yeah. By the way, thank you for a great career, sir. Appreciate you. Somebody, and I'm just pulled Rashad out of the hat, but also nice time to say thank you for all of those wonderful fights. Somebody will see Rashad talk about fighting, and they'll say, I really like Rashad. He's unbiased. Nobody is unbiased. Bias isn't something that is somebody you should judge someone for. Bias is a natural reaction to the environment. Bias is the natural thing that happens to you because of the information that you're given, how you're given it, what you learn, where you come from. You know, I travel to America. We're Canadian. I'm in Canada right now. I travel to America. I travel to Russia. I was just in England. Any of these places have bias just by where they live. We were just in Ireland too. The Irish don't like the English. They have a bias. It's not bad. You know what caused their bias? This fucking English invaded them, like occupied them. And only like 100 years ago, too. 100 years sounds like a long time until you realize that means some people are alive who were still occupied by it. No judgment against the English. It was a different time. The Irish didn't decide to. It's just a natural bias. Everything. We're all biased. All of us. And a very common bias is the bias of what we've seen lately, what we've just seen. Recency bias. You know, we just saw him take out Frankie Edgar. One piece of information, just took out Frankie Edgar, which no matter how you slice it, bias aside, awesome. Two, now we add to that. Nobody's ever finished Frankie Edgar. Holy shit. Well, we just saw him do it, and nobody's ever done it. That's even higher. Now, but the recency of it, what we're going to see in the footage is we're going to see when we see footage of him, and I forget, there's a term for that too, a term for that bias, where if you see on the news, so the fact of the matter is it's safer to live where we live now than it has been in 40 or 50 years. But more news shows violent crimes here. So that frequency bias will cause a lot of people here to think that we live in a dangerous time. We live in the safest time going. Frequency bias, what we've seen. Recency bias. We just saw a thing on the news. It showed all this stuff. All of that will affect how we see Ortega's striking. Doesn't mean he's not the best striker in the world. It just means the information we're dealing with is not just blind fact. And our reaction, a common reaction, it's got underrated striking. Could be overrated. Could be. That little context. Why was he so good in that moment? There's a number of factors, but the biggest one, you watch it. This is what I do. I'm very pleased and grateful to be able to say to you, I studied fighting for a living for over a decade. And I can tell you when a human being is in a near perfect state of flow and performance, and it's different than when people are fighting and doing quite well. Now, and Brian Ortega in those moments was in the purest state of high performance. The issue isn't, is Ortega striking that good? The issue is, does he have the ability to be in that state? Because if he does, he needs that to win this fight, to hurt this guy, to shock this guy. Because when we're coming down to it, Max Holloway is a genius. Max Holloway moves his feet in incredibly deceptive ways. And you see as you look here, if I was closer, as I put my hand to your camera, it interferes with your vision, right? We know that you don't have to do much to do that. But as it's doing that, interfering with your vision, I'm moving my feet. And those little subtle movements of my feet and torso and how it all relates is how Max Holloway, that's what he's a superhero at. That's one of his superpowers. People are like, well, why doesn't he get taken down? He's not where you think he is. It's number one. And number two, you're always one step away from having to reset. If Max Holloway is over here, you have to move there. And so Max Holloway is here on me. I have to move my position to get to him. When I do that, that's a play. Let's say it's a play in chess or checkers. It's one move, right? He uses that move to go over here or to go over there or to be at a different distance or to be closer or to fucking hit me, right? He's really good at that. He's on another level. Just technical skill to punch and kick and move your feet to put you in a position to do it. He's on a much, much higher level than Brian Ortega. Cub was too. You have to look at that. You have to. And don't get me wrong. I am not, we talked about bias. The biases that I come by honestly and accidentally. I fucking love Brian Ortega. I'm not judging or choosing somebody or I like somebody better and I'm trying to find information to like make to support what I believe. I love them both. Two brilliant artists. But as I look at it, just the purity of the skills, Max Holloway, for the purpose of hitting someone, moves his feet and body and strikes and controls how and where we are in relation to hitting each other better than Brian Ortega. Better, right? The term better. Just purity of skill. And Cub did too. There's a submission attempt at the end of round one with Ortega versus Cub Swanson. Awesome. Almost gets him. And then the submission, I believe, in round two, gets him. I don't know. Let's say that was at 3 minutes. So let's say it's an 8-minute fight. It could easily have been 2:20 or it could have been, 4:10. I'm not sure. It's all blended together. But most of those other minutes, not only was Cub beating him, he had befuddled Ortega a little bit. Now, again, this is not a judgment. This is just the information we have, bearing in mind that Ortega will improve massively, right? But what Ortega can do, and did against Frankie was this state of performance. And we talk about it a lot, and because it is the most important thing. Do you know who Brad Katona is? Brad Katona, he's a finalist of this year's Ultimate Fighter. So Brad Katona, hi Brad, if somebody passes this on to you. I saw him in Dublin, Ireland, and they just aired his semifinal fight for the Ultimate Fighter. And I've known Brad since he was 14 or 15. I rolled with him in Winnipeg when I was fighting back there, and he's now 26, so So it was before my first fight. I think my first fight was 10 years ago this month. Mark, can you just pull up, I've never asked this before, can you pull up Robin Black on SureDog? It's not that impressive. I'm just curious as to when my very first fight was. I think it was 2008, and it was in July, so I'm almost 10 years ago. So it was before that, and I was training with Brad Katona. He was a kid. He was 14 or 15. And, you know, he was learning to punch and kick and move and fight. Yeah. July 26, 2008. So when we're in Calgary, it'll be the 10-year anniversary of my first fight. I'm doing my one-man show in Calgary, July 27th. Calgary at the Palace Theater in Calgary. Tickets go on sale today, in fact. Yeah, please look it up on Facebook. But Brad Katona, I bump into him, and I asked him about his fights. I asked him about how it's going. He didn't mention punch, kick. He didn't mention block. He didn't mention jiu-jitsu or wrestling. He talked about state of performance. He talked about mental state. And it isn't like, you got to have a lot of confidence. It sounds both simpler and more like voodoo than it is. But essentially, to perform really well and freely, you have to be in a biochemical state. It's a real state. It's just a state of expression, freedom, not tight, not self-doubt. And what it does is it changes you. You have endorphins released, your testosterone goes up, your cortisol goes down, all of these things to allow you to perform better. It's not just, being comfortable or, being confident. It is a biological state. And that's what Brian Ortega has been doing well. Of course, when that guy gets your neck, you're in trouble. And of course, when he is grappling. But why is he such a good grappler? Why? Because in that moment, he is capable of anything. In that moment, he can do things he didn't even do in the room, do in the training room, and those things are amazing. And he struck with Frankie that way. And he must do that. He must do that because Max Holloway is in that state almost all the time. And you can't say all the time. And the job of the athlete is to also understand that it's not all the time. And when I spoke with Brad Katona, this is all he talked about. And I asked him about it. I said, it's amazing. At 26, this is what we're talking about. He goes, at this level, we all know how to fight. And he was examining himself and how comfortable he was. They use the term aroused, and it's got nothing to do with what you think it is, just psychologically and emotionally, lit. Right? And is too much or not enough? Do you have enough? Are you wound up or are you too calm? And that is something within your control. And whether it's Max Holloway or Brian Ortega or Brad Katona or you, the more you work on that, it's applicable to life in a lot of ways. Somebody pisses you off, you don't have to freak out. This is within if you have the ability to control your emotion and your psychological state, you can do that in life. Right? So there's a massive gain by studying yourself in this way. It allows you to become a better fighter, but it allows you to become a better human being. So at this level, that is mandatory. And there are some, we don't understand how and why yet, but you can see it clearly. And as someone who studies this, and I study, we'll share on another day, or Mark will put it on the website, robinblackmma.com, some of the books that I'm reading about applied focus, about the flow state itself, about all of these things, about high performance. Early on the channel, we talked to somebody named Dr. Joel Lapata, who studies this in improvisational jazz players. I've talked to Rogan about this. I recommended a book to Joe Rogan called The Rise of Superman, and he had that author on the Joe Rogan podcast. Give that a listen. This is real, right? The top guys do this. What I'd love to talk about that author with, and we have spoken. He sent me a signed copy, and he spoke with Rogan. I'd love to talk to him about the idea that some of these people can affect and throw the other one out of that state. Max Holloway did that with Jose Aldo. Now, coincidentally, Conor McGregor did that with Jose Aldo as well, and it may be something like age or miles, or it could be something hormonal that affects confidence. It could be any number of things. And in Jose Aldo, please don't think that I'm choosing him. It just came to mind. We see it a lot. To be honest, Conor McGregor did that with everyone but Nate Diaz. Why was Eddie Alvarez incapable of free performance on the night? You tell me. I don't know. But it happened. Happened with Aldo. Happened with Poirier. Happened with Brando. Happened with Mendez. He performed in a free state, and they were tight and confused isn't the right word, but hesitant. They were not free. That's real. That's real. Max has done that to people as well. So all of this game, because, and I know we're going to different places. This is what I do. I can't come back at you with, if it gets to the ground, with his elite level black belt jiu-jitsu submission game, Brian Ortega. Well, Max Holloway's been submitted. You know all of that. Twitter will give you that. But this is something you can now go study. Get that book. That one I like, The Rise of Superman. It was the very first thing Joe Rogan has now become a friend and has been incredibly generous to me. And the reason I bring that up is because the very first conversation I had with that good man was about this book. Because it moved me. It moved me. It changed the way you understand things. If the way that you read, study, play, make out with your girlfriend, cook, fight, everything can be improved by being in a better state of expression, and that's real, and we know it's real. It's measured in the brain. Well, that's something we need to study. And so by talking about that with Brian Ortega, why was he so good against Frankie? Was it his underrated striking? No. It was his ability to be truly free and improvisational and innovative and creative and see it all, because that is one of the byproducts of the flow state, is time appears different. And you talk to anybody. Man, there's so many fighters. This Mike Richmond. Mike, if somebody passes this to you, also hello. I was commentating bare knuckle boxing in London 3-4 weeks ago. I've been all over. I've been in London and Ireland and Singapore and Los Angeles lately. So I don't know where I've been. But so Mike Richmond, he fought in Bellator a number of times. He knocked out my friend Chris Hordeski, and he's had some brilliant moments. And again, we're sitting around. I share a house with the fighters often. They put me in a house with a few of the fighters from the red side, which I appreciate because I can talk to them, study them, see their process, see how they, and then, you can have a beer with their coach because the coach doesn't have to fight tomorrow. So you get to pick their mind. And Mike talked about that in the best fights as he sees them. And I've had that experience a few times in my 9 fights, particularly the last fight, but other times as well, brief moments of it, where you see everything and it's coming at you. And it's, Demetrius Johnson, John Jones, these guys are in that state near 100% of the time. Time slows. So so Brian Ortega could see everything clearly and do things that he didn't even train. And maybe he did train that elbow in close. Maybe he did. Or maybe he didn't. It doesn't matter. He was capable of doing it. It was a state of expression. That has to be there. If that is there, he's in this fight. Although I was going to say if it's not, he's not. Max Holloway can't believe that just because 95% of the time he's been in that optimum state is something that must be examined and studied like Brad Katona's doing now. Brad Katona fights next weekend. The Ultimate Fighter finale, I believe, is July 5th or 6th. Let's see if Brad can do it. He studied himself and made a lot of notes when he was, and sparring, the stress of sparring can allow you to study these things. This is all real. Is Ortega a better jiu-jitsu player than Max Holloway? Sure he is. Is Max Holloway, who doesn't have as long a reach as you think, able to make it feel like he always has a reach advantage, even though he often has a reach disadvantage by moving his feet and changing his body's position in space? Yes, he can. Who has the better wrestling, or when and if somebody has a full grip on each other, who can make that work? Who knows? But this is what matters in this fight. And this is what matters in almost every fight. And this is what matters in life, to the point that you must read about it. You must understand it's real, that there are better states of performing in almost everything. And people who are good at being in this highly focused state, it's not a trance, it's not hypnosis, it's just being better at being present. You study it also by doing meditation and mindfulness. Even yoga can help you a little bit. This is fucking life. This isn't just Max Holloway versus Brian Ortega. This is a better life. So go read that book. Read that book. It'll point you to some other books, and we'll do that as well. You know, if you want to leave a message at the end of this and say, I didn't analyze this enough for you, I don't think this channel's for you. You can see clearly what we do here, and I make no apologies for it. There's people out there who love this, and that's who we're talking to, and that's who we do this for. And those people, fuck, I thank you so much. It is a privilege to be able to talk to you, share ideas, and chat with you. If you're so inclined, and you find my Facebook group about my one-man show July 27th in Calgary, please give it a share. I'm super pumped. July 28th in Calgary is UFC on Fox. Who's the main event that night again?
For Calgary.
Eddie Alvarez, Dustin Poirier. Awesome. Eddie, also, let's have brunch on Sunday. Let's do a day after brunch, Sunday the 29th. Thank you guys so much. Robin Black MMA on Instagram, Twitter, and robinblackmma.com. Thank you. Appreciate you. Blackout.